Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and today I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Lawrence Connolly's namesake. It's Sean. You're from a different part of the world, but you share the same state of mind. How are you doing, Sean?
Good, yeah. Before I came on, I was just looking out in the back garden and looking at my 6 palm trees, thinking it's not rained in 3 months and just how far I've come since I used to live in a rainy flat in Glasgow and listen to the music from King Tut's every night.
Oh, brilliant. Were you actually in St. Vincent Street, or were you in that neck of the woods?
Yeah, I can't remember the exact name of the street, but it was just off Blythewood Square. So I backed on
Ah,
to King Tut's.
King Tut's, and now you have the absolute luxury and the privilege of a completely different climate, but it's not changed your Celtic state of mind for sure. And you've not been on the show since last week's results, so we'll be touching on that. But obviously, today we are talking about Celtic trying to extend their lead at the top again, back to the 9 points by hopefully defeating St Mirren in Paisley. It's the only ground, it's the only team that hasn't been a happy hunting ground for Celtic this season. I'm going to ask you straight off the bat, Sean, is that a concern today, or is it a different world now?
No, it is a concern. I believe we've played 2 games at New St Mirren Park under Ange, and we've not scored a goal across those 2 games. So when I did read that, I was like, okay, this was the fixture that jumped out on what was left as the most difficult, and it is a concern. I think we have to be absolutely firing today. I think I wore this top deliberately. Because obviously that's a big talking point of what's been happening today and this week. And I'm hoping that's not something that comes back to haunt us. I hope there's not this third kit curse.
This has been a discussion, Sean, since the actual game itself, which I think was in September. And there was all this chat around the game, and people were going back to other matches where strips have put people off, etc. The famous Man U game at the Dell against Southampton. And I don't think that had much to do with the level of our performance, but I am superstitious. And that's the thing, I am superstitious. And during the week, obviously, there was also the reveal or the sneak preview, or whatever you can call it, of Celtic's proposed 4th kit as well, which is something I've also got a view on. Today, I think we're wearing the hoops today, are we?
No, I believe we're wearing the cursed strip, the grey with the green, and St Mirren are wearing all black away kit.
That's right, so what they've changed. I get you.
Both teams have changed, yeah. The referee, right. David Dickinson, apparently requested that. And St Mirren are none too happy about it.
Playing at home with the away jersey. But there you go. It's one of these things that I've spoken about. I won't labour it because I did talk to JP about it on Thursday. I just think that surely you know your domestic opponents. You know the 3 colours schemes that you've got for that season, and surely you can work out that you can get the 3 colour schemes right so that you don't clash. And that's not happened this season. If it happens in a European game from time to time, that's understandable, because you don't know who you're going to be drawn against. But we won't labour the fact on the strips. We're going to bring up the teams just in case someone in the comment section hasn't seen them yet. We'll start off, obviously, with Angie's selection. And this, for me, actually matches with a comment made by Jungle Lion, who is very quick off the mark this morning. Here we go. No mistakes with the team selection this time around. And pick your best team now until the end of the season. That's something I totally agree with, Sean. I said during the week there, every single game from now to the end of the season, we have to go out like we have done today and just play the strongest side. There can be no real tinkering, I don't think.
I think there'll be an opportunity to rotate midweek for the home game. But today was an absolute stick-on for playing the same team. What stands out for me is when we did lose that 2-0 game at New St Mirren Park in October, the 2 worst players on the pitch that day were Adam Moy and Maida. And since January, they've been the 2 best players, or maybe you could make an argument that Maida was poor last week and Haksabanovic might have merited a start today, but I think today is a chance for redemption for Maida, and I hope to see that.
Yeah, well, you know, we will talk about this team. And strangely, I'm going to start with the bench, Sean. So, as you can see, Bain, Haksabanovic, Abada, Turnbull, Kobayashi, Iwata, O'Reilly and Ralston. You've got a good combination on that bench. Bain's in there because of the injury to Seagrist, who has started training or will start training on Monday again. But then you've got a situation, I feel, where you've got guys like Abada, Turnbull, O'Reilly, and Ralston, who have got plenty of first team experience, and they're just itching to try and stake a claim back in the team. So Abada will be looking at the aforementioned Maida, for example. And if his form drops, then he's maybe thinking to himself, I'll get in and Jota can switch to the left. Turnbull, similarly, he looked pretty disappointed after the League Cup final, I've got to say. Not that I'm going back to the Neil Lennon season and I'm a body language expert again, Sean, but he looked a wee bit gutted, which is understandable, I guess. And Ralston, and Ralston, who hasn't had a bad game this season, finds himself on the bench because of the form of Johnson. And then, of course, you've got O'Reilly, and that's down to the form of Aaron Moy. But there's a group of players on that bench there. You mentioned Haksabanovic, and I think Kobayashi, and Iwata probably drop into this as well. These are four guys that they haven't had the same kind of level of exposure to the first team. They've shown in glimpses, probably Haksabanovic more than the other three so far, that there's some real talent there. And at some point, you would expect for them to get a chance, wherever the circumstances allow, they get a chance in the first team. And all four of them are good enough, and they're at that standard that they could stake a claim. They could be getting spoken about like Moy is just now, who probably wasn't anybody's first pick until, as you say, January in the World Cup. But I think we've seen enough quality in those four players to suggest that they could do exactly as Moy has done.
Yeah, 100%. And Iwata looked great last week when he came on in the cup final. So I think he's very much getting up to speed now. He's one that could be in line for a start midweek. But yeah, Haksabanovic looked great. And I do wonder, though, if Haksabanovic is more suited to these kind of games where teams are pressing high, as we've seen in the past. Something that I don't think it was because Iwata came in, but since Callum McGregor played his 400th game, he seems to have got like a second lease, like a new, he's been re-energized in some way, and he's been absolutely brilliant in the last few games. And he was, for me, my man of the match in the cup final last week, Callum McGregor.
Yeah, we were looking at the goals and his part. Where he's in the mid, he's in the centre circle basically, and he just decides, no, I'm going to drive this forward. And it's him that then changes the whole tempo of that move, gets Rangers on the back foot, and we, of course, scored the second goal. And sometimes when it's not the assist and it's not the secondary assist, Sean, you miss that bit. You miss that bit where it's the change in tempo and it's actually the beginning of that move, the origins of the move. And that was down to Callum McGregor. We've had discussions on here about the appearances, like you say, because he's heading towards, an esteemed group of just 12 players who have played 500 plus games for the club, the trophies. So he's on 17 now. And, you're then looking at the guys like Scott Brown, Bobby Lennox, Billy McNeil, who are into the 20s, and you're thinking, how close can he get to that? And obviously, you then start thinking back to him being given the captain's armband and the difference in the player that we see now compared to the one that we've seen under Neil Lennon. What do you think is the biggest difference?
Well, obviously he's got a lot more responsibility now. But also since Scott Brown left, he's actually done a really good job of the defensive role. Again, something you can't underestimate from last week. When we did lose to St Mirren a few months ago, he was targeted by Bacchus and the other midfielders who I can't remember, who they were really weren't letting him get any time. They were closing down Moy, McGregor, and I can't remember who else started that day, probably O'Reilly. But McGregor was one that was targeted, and it was something that the team we played last week were not successfully able to do. They actually pressed a little bit higher beyond McGregor, and that just kind of gave him the run of the game and let us run the show. So I'd be surprised if St Mirren play the high press. I'd expect them to play more the medium press and be on top of Callum McGregor with Curtis Main or whoever it is pressing Callum McGregor, because Stephen Robinson knows that he is our main man, that he is our danger man. Everything goes through him.
Yeah, I was going to speak about St Mirren as well, and Stephen Robinson, and Scottish football as a whole, because the circus keeps rolling on, doesn't it? Obviously, we've gone and done the business last week, and then after that, you just watch the managerial merry-go-round. You look at the games yesterday. You look at, bad refereeing decisions again. And it's just, it's Scottish football. It really is. There's a drama. There's a circus that surrounds it. Joe Hart, Alistair Johnson, Cameron Carter-Vickers, Carol Starfelt and Greg Taylor. Now, I don't think many would disagree with that being our strongest lineup at the back. Carter-Vickers, his performance against Rangers again, Sean, unbelievable. He is an absolute rock at the back for Celtic. I've seen the tweets from sources who have got contacts all over world football saying that he's gathering interest down south. I'm not surprised. I've seen the same from Starfelt earlier in the season. Not surprised at that either. Carter Vickers for me he's the glue. He bonds that whole back line for me. And that, I know that Joe Hart has been a real steadying influence and, a real leader at the back. But Carter Vickers for me he's getting better and better. And he's the type of player that we are going to have to bat off some big offers from big clubs. There's no doubt about it. But I want to see him, because we didn't get a chance this season. I want to see him playing at least 6 games in the Champions League in the green and white hoops before we start looking at that possibility.
Yeah, definitely. He's literally irreplaceable as far as I'm concerned. I don't think we're in any transfer market where we can find someone as good as that. He kind of just fell into our lap by luck, and it was just luck as well that we'd agreed the transfer fee in advance. Well, I say luck, it probably wasn't luck. It was good business that we'd agreed the transfer fee in advance. And again, you've seen the only domestic game we've lost this season was when we had Welsh and Jens playing at centre back, and today we've got Carter Vickers and Starfelt. So there should be a material difference from that point going forward.
Yeah. Just to break off a wee bit, because you mentioned Stephen Welsh. And again, this is just my opinion, Sean. And I know you'll have your own, and others in the comment section will have their own opinions. I think in the first team squad, as it stands at the moment, and I don't mean the 12 guys who are out on loan at the moment, I think that Stephen Welsh is in a group of players who will be leaving in the summer. And I think James McCarthy's in that group, and Connor Hazard as well. So you've got 3 guys in that first team squad. And then you're looking at the 12 loanees, and you're looking at how many of them are actually going to come back to Celtic and make an impact. Some of the younger ones get an almost free pass because we don't really know what they're capable of, and you don't want to write them off. But the large majority of that group, and I'm talking Liam Scales, Liam Shaw, Urigide, Barkas and Ayeti, we all know who's out on loan. I think at least 10 of them will leave Celtic Park. So if you include the 3 I've just mentioned in the first team squad, you're then looking at over a dozen players leaving this summer. So a massive turnover again. But I think we need to do that. And even if those 12 or 13 players leave the club because they're not really contributing, Sean, if you can get them off the wage bill and you replace them with 3 or 4 of real quality, then I think that's part of the Ange evolution of the squad.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. They are not contributing. And we were talking about this Asian Cup next year on our show on Wednesday in Celtic Down Under, and we made the joke that we're going to have to keep Albion Ayeti when he comes back, because he's the only striker we've got that's not going to be in Qatar next January. So I hope we actually do shift him out and bring someone else in instead. But you're right. There's a lot of non-contributing players on a lot of money there, and it's an issue. Well, it's not an issue in the sense that we've just pulled in a big amount of bank, but it could be an issue if we don't deal with it and be proactive.
And again, though, Sean, it's a legacy issue largely. I mean, I know there's a few guys in there that Ange. Well, I was going to say Ange brought to the club. Ange was a manager when they came to the club. So you've got Scales, McCarthy, Urigide and Shaw. But largely it's an issue that he has inherited. And I know there are some good websites out there who give you an idea of salaries, football salaries. And when you start totting it up, 12 players at Celtic, even though, they're not contributing, you look at the wages. And I know that the guys on loan, there's a deal cut with the club that they go on loan to in terms of the wage. But these guys are all coming back in the summer, and they're bringing with them, let's say, 120 grand a week wages. And you start thinking to yourself, wow, if we get them off the wage bill and we replace them with the likes of a Haksabanovic, Kobayashi, Owen Iwata. For all the guys that aren't contributing, I think that would be tremendous. You mentioned Celtic Down Under, which reminded me to put the logo and put the sticker back up on the screen there. Celtic Down Under, tell us a wee bit about it. Where do we find you and when are you going live?
Well, we've just recently expanded, so we now do a Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday show, and we have various contributors now. Monday night is now a very Western Australian show, and it somewhat overlaps with you guys, although when the time zones change, we're not sure how that's going to go. But other than that, it's normally a bit earlier in the morning, Scottish time. I don't know what time it would be. It's 4:30 here, so probably 9:30 in Scotland in the morning, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And we are getting some decent numbers now, probably a lot down to linking up with you guys and, yeah, just basically adding more shows and just building it up slowly. So we're getting there.
Good. And you know what I'd love to do, and we probably weren't well enough prepared at this end last time round, is the next time Celtic go to Australia, we should come out and we should do some kind of live event with the Celtic Down Under guys as well. I know that you don't all live near to each other necessarily, but it would be great to hook up and do something on the live circuit, because we have started doing a lot of live stuff over here in Scotland, and it would be good to spread the wings a wee bit and do the whole Celtic international thing and get out there and see some of the Australian Celtic supporters. The midfields, McGregor, Hatate and Moy. We've spoken about McGregor and Moy as well. One thing I need to point out, Kevin Graham was in here this morning just before we started going live. He wasn't able to contribute today, he's busy, but he was in with a wee chat, and it brought to mind the point he made about the goal that Rangers scored last week. And then somebody slowed the footage down and showed it again. Moy shoved by Morelos. It was a proper push in the back. And that's the kind of thing you would hope, Sean, that would have been picked up. But no, not even a mention of it.
I think when the ball is so far away and when it's not, like when both players are standing on the ground, it's kind of different. Like if you're shoved in the air or if somebody's got their hands on your shoulders, it's an obvious one to give. But I think when it's that, does that make sense? Like it's well before the ball gets to him, and all he's really doing is creating space. So that's not the sort of thing you would re-referee. It's not a clear and obvious mistake. Even though if the referee is watching it directly, he probably does give a free kick.
Yeah, and the thing is, I'm asking you because you do have a knowledge being a ref yourself, so it's always good to get your take on it. The difference being you actually know the rules. Most people talk about these things and we don't really understand the rules. Rio Hatate in their match tip for the Player of the Year. He's just won Player of the Month. And again, what a performance last week against Rangers, Sean.
It's really hard to predict a Player of the Year at the moment, but you're right. Hatate, since he had that poor game against St Johnstone and was dropped for Turnbull in the next game, he has just been absolutely electric since then. And during the week, he was given some credit to his form to Gavin Strachan, which was the strangest thing I've heard. Not to like denigrate Gavin Strachan, just more that I thought his role was like more set pieces and things like that. But nothing about Rio Hatate's play makes me think of Gavin Strachan's style of play. So I'm not really sure what the connection is there, but apparently Gavin Strachan's responsibility is feedback for midfielders. So that was an interesting one to hear. But whenever this voting for Player of the Year thing, do you think it's all about being in right form at the right time? Because you had Haksabanovic had Player of the Month in December or November, whatever it was, and Jota was on fire at the start of the season. Is there a recency bias around about the time the voting forms go out, or is it going to be Carter Vickers just because he's been so good all season?
I think there is. I do think there is a recency bias. If somebody has that wee purple patch just a month or so before the votes come in, and it's fresh in the mind, they're going to get the votes. And like you say, you maybe have someone who has performed really, really well earlier on in the campaign, and they're going to be overlooked. Carter Vickers, he just plays brilliantly all the way through the season, as you say. Now, up top, the thing again, sorry, we had to going back to Rio, is Ange during the week saying there's another couple of levels that he's going to go up, he believes. And that is just for Celtic fans a frightening prospect for the opposition, maybe even scarier. Up top with Jota, Maida, and Kyogo. Now, during the week there, I was talking about Kyogo, and we were speaking about, and I know it's a hard one to predict, Sean, loss of form, injury, whatever might happen. We're looking at the games that we still had to play, potentially, and the fact that he's on 24. This is maybe a discussion for after today's game, if we can get another couple of goals on that tally. Because we were looking at the players, there's been a lot of Celtic players who have scored 30-plus goals in a season. Loads and loads over the years. But there's, again, a select group of players who have scored 40-plus, and no pressure, Kyogo. No pressure whatsoever. But, it really would mean a brilliant bit of form between now and the end of the season. But that's where he is. He's sitting at 24 goals with about 14 games to go, Sean. And this is a player who, pundits were asking Ange not that long ago about Kyogo's loss of form. And Ange put them in their place. He's seen off Giakoumakis. He's loved. He's iconic, as a Celtic player. How far can he take it this campaign, do you think?
I think 40 is a stretch, because that would need to be more than 1 goal per game for the rest of the season, which is not impossible, but there's going to be some tough games in there, especially after the split when you're only playing top 6 opposition. And we may or may not get. Well, actually, do you know what? If we do beat Hearts in the Cup, we're guaranteed to get a Diddy team in the semis, because there's only Diddy teams left in the other games. So there's a potential for some goals there. But I'd say he will break 30, but I don't think he'll get anywhere near 40. The only player that's got to 40 since Henrik Larsson, I believe, is Lee Griffiths in the year where he carried Ronnie Dyla's team. And apart from that, we've had some fantastic players that haven't even broke 30, like Edouard Dembele, although Edouard might have once, but typically wouldn't. And even like John Hartson wouldn't get to 40,
No, you're right. And feature of Brendan Rodgers' side was that the goals were spread out somewhat. We didn't rely on one guy to score all the goals. And actually, Ange's team's been a bit like that as well. So it's great to see Kyogo leading the scoring charts. I'd love to see him getting 40, but realistically, you're looking at 30-plus. If he was to come away with anything like that, it's been an astonishing season. And I think also when you look at the criticism he's come in for, the knock of not getting picked for Japan in the World Cup, he's probably had a more consistent second half of the season than first, even though I know he got his hat-tricks and stuff like that against Dundee United. But Kyogo, absolutely astonishing performance again. 2 League Cup finals, 2 braces. The finishing is absolutely excellent. And, there's no loss of confidence if he misses 2 or 3 chances before he gets his first goal, Sean.
Mm-hmm. And something as well that we do need to think about, not today, but down the coming months, is he's now 28, so he's maybe got 2 more years before he starts, because of the style of play, before he starts to drop off. So after this summer, there's no financial return if we move him on beyond after this summer. So if we wanted to get any money, I'd rather keep him personally. I'd rather have the goals than have 7-8 million for him. But that's something to think about. He's going to be one of those ones like under Martin O'Neill, they age up to 30 and they just leave on a free if he does stay for another 2 years.
We did speak about that, actually. With Martin O'Neill fresh in our mind, a week ago, obviously, he was on the stage with a Celtic State of Mind live in Glasgow, and we spoke about that, the ageing aspect of the side. I still, loved having an ageing Chris Sutton, Alan Thompson, Neil Lennon, John Hartson, but like you say, there was absolutely no chance we were going to make money on any of these guys, and that was the case. His side were very expensive to assemble. But when you look at the sell-on, we didn't really make any money. And players that played under him, who we did sell for cash, were guys like probably Stan Petrov and eventually Aidan McGeady. But obviously the outlay for the big signings was never brought back. But I'm a bit like yourself. I'm looking at Kyogo as a fan, and I'm just thinking, as long as he's banging in the goals, I'm not looking at that, although the club definitely will be. Jota on the wing, the song. How good is that? Ellie Dixon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it never ceases to amaze me how creative the Celtic fans are when it comes to writing songs about anything, but particularly about players. I often wonder where they get these ideas from, and not just that, like how they spread it. I guess it's supporters buses, right? For away games, you just sing it on the bus, and then you've got 50 guys in the stadium, and everyone joins in. But it's always impressive to me. Always impressive.
Yeah, it definitely is. And of course, Maida, who last weekend, right, we were sitting at half time, and I thought Maida had a very ineffective first half.
Offensively speaking.
Yeah, offensively speaking, absolutely. And we were sitting at half time, and a lot of the comments were coming in saying we need to take him off. And we basically said, no, he's got to stay on. He's got to stay on because of the work he's putting in off the ball, the defensive work he's putting in. And then he goes in and has a brilliant second half, I thought, of the cup final. He's a player who, Ange's been asked the question, what are you feeding him in terms of the work rate? It's unbelievable. He must be an absolute nightmare to play against. I think the big issue at the weekend was just trying to get in behind the fullbacks. It wasn't working for Maida. But he didn't, again, like Kyogo, he didn't get frustrated. And he played a massive part in the opening goal by miskicking the ball because he's staggered everybody. Some of them, were caught napping, and Kyogo obviously was quick off the mark. But on this form, Sean, you must be a bad at sitting, on the bench thinking to yourself, how am I going to get into this team? Because Maida, even when he's playing bad, he's contributing and doing well for the team.
Yeah, and maybe Abada would rather be a sub for Southampton, in which case we'll take 8 figures and best of luck. But yeah, you're right, Maida last week, Tavernier actually did a pretty good job of taking 4 or 5 yards, squaring him up and showing him to the byline. Because and that was the problem. There was times where he was just running out. He just didn't have the space to go into. So he just started coming back inside and playing a square ball. And the first time we were really effective down that side was when Greg Taylor broke the line. And as you said, Maida had made the run inside that absolutely just turned the Rangers' defence inside out. They didn't know what to do at that point. So we do need sometimes to have an air of unpredictability, an air of dynamism. And that's certainly, with that much energy and that much movement, that's something that he'll always offer.
Yeah, absolutely does. He's been a tremendous signing when you look at the fee. This is the St Mirren lineup: Carson, Fraser, Gogic, Dunn, Strain, Bacchus, O'Hare, Kiltie, Smallgreave, and Main. And you look at the job that Stephen Robinson's done, both at Motherwell, where he was bringing Motherwell into cup finals, for example, taking them to cup finals. He's dragged St Mirren into the top half of the table. I think that there's a certain fit for a football manager, and Stephen Robinson and St Mirren, or previously Motherwell, is that fit. You know what you're getting with a team that's managed by Robinson. They can be very physical, Sean. And by the way, you've just got to combat that. You've got to deal with it, as Celtic have done previously. We do deal with it. But one player that I think that really adds to that in the Celtic squad, the physicality aspect, is Alistair Johnston. I think that he relishes that kind of battle and that combative style, Sean. And, by the way, so does Tony Ralston. I think he's one of the best in the business at Celtic. But I've been really impressed with Alistair Johnston's approach to the nitty-gritty of Scottish football.
Yeah, he's been sensational. And even the whole getting involved in the... I know you shouldn't really get involved in verbals, but to do it at that stage in a derby game it's very endearing to us fans. Maybe Postecoglou wouldn't be too happy with it, but it really gets him on side with the fans when he does show that desire and fight, and more than just his football, which has also been speaking for itself, both defensively, more defensively than anything, but also in moments offensively.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to seeing him, rolling the sleeves up this afternoon as well. Some great comments coming in. Joe Hamilton: strong team, get it done in the first half and bring on Haxa, please. That, I hope, will be the case, and we can maybe see a wee bit more of Awata and Kobayashi. We've not seen Kobayashi recently either. We're getting some comments coming in with predictions. 3-0 says K Matsu, 4-0. Uncle Nobby's Steamboat. Confidence. I think it all comes down to the timing of that first goal. If we get the early goal, I know it sounds kind of basic and cliched in many ways, Sean, but if we do get the first goal, I can see it maybe turning into a 4-0 win. If we don't, it can become a wee bit more of that that scrappy game that we were just talking about, that certain players like Johnston will be up for.
Yeah, and if you score in the first 30 minutes, then you're right, it generally does turn into a 4-1 game at some point or something like that. But yeah, if St Mirren do frustrate us and do play the same kind of style that they have in the last few games, then we are going to be relying on a piece of brilliance like we had against Johnson on a couple of occasions actually in that game, or a mistake. And the game we played at Celtic Park, Carson did have a couple of mistakes at the end that put a gloss in the scoreline. So I'm hoping he maybe chucks another one today.
What we've got here is time to get rid of that away strip, Hoodoo. Yes. Oh no, the grey strips. Well, let's put it to bed today. Sean, quick prediction before we go to the action.
I'll go 3-1.
3-1 Celtic. I'm going to go 2-0 to Celtic. Thanks everybody for getting involved. Please like the video by giving us a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. We'll see you at half-time. All that's left for me to say, once again, Sean Connolly, thanks for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.